Tonight on the Fifth Chapter, Rob Parker of FS1 and Fox Sports Radio joined Dennis and Brian to discuss Cam Newton, the coronavirus, and the 60-game MLB schedule, as well as his brand new book. Tom Izzo lands one of the biggest recruits in college basketball history. But will Ypsilanti's Emoni Bates stay committed or go pro in 2 years? And the ink is dry. Spencer Torkelson is officially a Detroit Tiger, and he's on the 60-man roster. But will he make his MLB debut in 2020? Join the conversation by commenting live on YouTube and Facebook Live. This is the Fifth Chapter with Dennis Fithian and Brian Chapman. We represent the Fifth by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talk sports, but people can't wait. He represents the Fifth. Being true, EMU will cut Dennis to the fall, and his veins bleed blue. They got respect around the state. When that light turns red, so don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the Fifth Chapter. Brian Chapman. Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spit in the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the Fifth Chapter. That's right, and welcome to the Fifth Chapter. I am Brian Chapman. He is Dennis Fithian. We are ready to go for episode 15. Dennis and I have 5 more fantastic chapters for all of you out there.
That's right, Chap. We're ready to go, man. Getting into the swing of things. Last day of June.
That's right. And as far as today's show is concerned, let me first do the usual and thank everybody who is watching via YouTube or Facebook Live, and also those who are watching on the podcast, which is available on Apple, Google, and Spotify, usually by around midnight after the show. Make sure that you like and subscribe and participate in each show by sending in your comments live on Facebook or live on YouTube on the side. Let's take a look, though, at today's book. And as you can see in today's show, in the second chapter, Spencer Torkelson signs his deal with the Detroit Tigers, and he's added to the 60-man roster. Could he make his debut in 2020? In the third chapter, we have a chat with Rob Parker of FS1, Fox Sports 1, and Deadspin. We're going to be talking to him about what's going on in the sports world, as well as his brand new book, Tales of Rob Parker's Urinating Mouse. In the fourth chapter, the Red Wings were hoping for that number 1 pick. They got the 4th pick, worst pick possible. What does this mean for the team? And then in the 5th chapter, it is game time. And as far as that book is concerned by Rob Parker, I have a copy of it. You can see it right here. Tales of Rob Parker's Urinating Mouse, a collection of tweets. And as you can see, Rob Parker's Urinating Mouse, whose name is Cotton, is urinating on a jersey, number 12. I wonder whose jersey that could be. Which number 12 does Rob Parker love to talk about left and right? We'll play that for you coming up in the third chapter. But, as you might expect, we start off with the first chapter. And in the first chapter, it's college basketball. Why would we be talking about college basketball in the state of Michigan, which is not a big college basketball state? This is not Kentucky. This is not North Carolina. Why would we be doing that on the last day of June? We didn't even have March Madness this year 3 months ago. The news has to be big for us to be doing that, and the news is big. And that is because on the second to last day of June, yesterday, you had one of the biggest high school superstar recruits of all time, announced where he was going to be going to school. Now, this is not a rising senior. This Ypsilanti-based high school basketball phenom, Emoni Bates, who won the National Gatorade Player of the Year as a sophomore, is about to enter his junior year of high school. He announced his commitment yesterday on ESPN, and here is how that commitment went.
Emoni, the time has come. Where are you going to be playing college basketball?
I'm not sure what the future may hold, but as I do know right now, I will be committed to Michigan State University. I want to say thank you to Coach Is and Coach OG for staying with me since I was a youngin', and just being there through the process and on the MSU stuff.
All right, family Sparty. I like it. What was it about the program that made you want to go play in East Lansing and Michigan State?
They've been showing love to me since I was, in 7th grade. And, they've been recruiting me hard since then. So I just know they're showing that they love is genuine. And they just been here for a long time. So I'm big on loyalty. And they show me all loyalty. So, I got to show them love back.
So there you go. Emoni Bates, a Spartan. Dennis, big day for the basketball world yesterday. Big day for the Spartan basketball world. Big get for Tom Izzo. What does this commitment mean? Emoni Bates to Michigan State.
Well, it could mean a great deal if in a couple of years he ends up going to Michigan State and heads up to East Lansing to play for Tom Izzo for a year. I mean, there hasn't been a recruit this big since LeBron James. And around here, there hasn't been a recruit this big, LeBron James, Chris Webber. Somebody I heard about Emoni Bates when he was 13. It's like, you can't believe this kid. He's in 7th grade. People were fighting over, where they thought he was going to end up going to high school, and it's just continued on. I mean, the kid's just 16 years old. You mentioned being the Gatorade Player of the Year. LeBron James wasn't even Gatorade Player of the Year as a sophomore. He's that talented. He is one of these guys that a lot of people have thought all along that he was just going to go right to the NBA. But I think if you're a Michigan State fan, I think there's a lot of people that immediately say, and that's what I just said too, it's going to be great if he ends up going there. But you know what? There's a few things that have happened here. One being the pandemic. I mean, the NBA said that they were, that there's been talk that they are going to allow seniors in high school after they don't have to go to college for 1 year. They can go right into the NBA like they used to. But with the pandemic, it could push it a year back, which would then put Emoni Bates in a situation where he would have to go to college. He told ESPN that he's not looking at the G League and he's not looking at Europe. So it's all going to come down, I would think, to whether or not the NBA waives that age restriction. And then even then, you know what? The kid's only 16 years old. Maybe he would want to just play 1 year of college basketball. I don't know about that, but if I was a Michigan State fan, I would be really excited about all the hoopla and what it could mean. I'd have my fingers crossed, and then, maybe he would come out and play for a year. Who even knows after that? But I would also understand that there's a chance, a pretty good chance, whatever you want to say. I'll say at least a 50% chance, that he could end up going to the NBA, right to the NBA from high school. Yeah,
it's more than just a pretty good chance. I'd say a 95% chance that he's going straight to the NBA. I don't have
if they waive the age restriction, they might not do that.
Yes, that's true. That's true. If they waive the age restriction, and most signs point to them doing that. If I'm a Michigan State fan right now, then I'm pleased because of the possibility of him coming. He's at least committed right now, and if I'm a Michigan State fan, I'm hoping, if I know some powerful people, I'm lobbying for them not to change the age restriction, because Michigan State would have a huge opportunity to do something big in that 2022-2023 season. But as far as if the NBA does lower the age requirement to 18 so that high schoolers can go straight to the NBA, if that happens, it's almost a certainty that he's going to go pro. All you have to do is listen to what he said to Jay Harris. The first thing that he said when Jay Harris said, "So where are you going to go?" He said, "I'm not sure what the future may hold, but I do know as of right now, I will be committing to Michigan State University." Now, you want to talk about a half-hearted commitment? When you see commitments in terms of college football, if they're made on National Signing Day, or if they're made at some of those big Under Armour football games and All-American games, or any other time, even if it's on Twitter right now, they say 100% committed to, University of Oklahoma or something like that. They don't say, "I'm not sure what the future may hold, but I do know as of right now I'm committed to Oklahoma." They say 100% committed. He didn't say that. He said, "I'm not sure what the future may hold, and as of right now." That's putting a whole lot of doubt in there. I think he knows, and everybody else knows, that if he can go pro, he's going to go pro, and he's never going to play for Tom Izzo and the Spartans.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think most people watching right now, I would agree with that too. You put it at 95%. I think that's right. The one thing is right now it's a 50-50 shot that the NBA will waive that age restriction.
Only 50-50?
Well, I think the idea was that they were going to do it, but because the pandemic, that could push it back a year. So there's a lot of uncertainty about that. I think there's one other thing to consider, in that Emoni Bates could reclassify. He's 2022. He could reclassify in 2021, and he could come out there and he could play instead of playing his senior season. You know, he could fast track, reclassify the 2021, and then he could be playing at Michigan State. I mean, what else does he have to prove at the high school level? He won it as a freshman, Gatorade Player of the Year as a sophomore. I mean, he's ready to play in college ball. I'm sure Spartan fans would welcome him in.
So you're talking about him doing a Jeremy Bonderman and getting like a GED after his junior year and then moving to Michigan State a year early, something like that?
No, we see football players do it all the time. They take, one semester and then they go right to college. This way, I think he's just, guys reclassify all the time. A lot of times, they do it to line up to, grab a scholarship here or there. But and sometimes it's a ranking thing. If there's somebody really strong in the class, obviously he's the number one guy here. The only reason he would be reclassifying is because, he would want to, instead of playing a senior year of high school basketball and just clowning on everybody and dunking on them, he could go play in the Big Ten. Be a challenge for him. And then, you never know. Once you get a guy there, like you would think after that, he would be a one and done for sure. Just like you would think that if the NBA waived its age restriction, that he would be going to the NBA. But there's other factors that are in play. I thought the thing that there were a couple things that were interesting. One is that Tom Izzo, on June 15th, that's when you could call the 2022, like the recruiting rules there on June 15th. So right at midnight, as soon as the clock struck midnight, Tom Izzo was on the phone, and Emoni Bates' dad said no other colleges called him to late that afternoon. So Izzo, talking about getting the jump on Bates, man, he was right there on his phone the first chance that he could, and nobody else seemed like they slept on him.
Yeah, that was kind of weird. He actually also mentioned that during his interview on ESPN that not as many college coaches were interested. I have to imagine it's because they assume he's going to go pro. If you're Duke, if you're Kentucky, if you're, any great team across the country, are you going to waste? I mean, not that a phone call is a waste, but are you going to waste any precious resources and time and money trying to get a guy that you think has no chance to go to you, whether it's because you think he's going to go to Michigan State or more likely because he's going to go pro in a couple of years?
You remember last year, I think Kentucky probably is one of those 4 teams that called him, maybe Duke too. I mean, they've been entertaining one and dones for a long time, but now he's talking about if he goes right to the pros. So remember last year that Calipari was at a Pistons game watching D Rose. I mean, he wasn't just up here watching, his former Memphis point guard. He was up here watching Ypsilanti Lincoln play basketball. There was a reason for that. I mean, he wanted Bates too. Maybe he should have called at 12:02. Tom Izzo got the jump on him, but I think Cal was in on him. The other thing I like, I know that he's planning on going from Ypsi Lincoln to his dad's prep school, which is an interesting jump right
Ypsilanti
there. But
Prep.
Yeah, he's staying, in Ypsi. I like that. I think of the last couple guys that I wanted to see that ended up where you knew were going to be bona fide stars. Not like this guy, like number one player overall, but Miles Bridges was pretty highly thought of, and so was Josh Jackson out of Detroit. And by the time those guys were ready to shine, getting into juniors and seniors, they're already bolted the state of Michigan and went to prep schools elsewhere so they could travel the country and play with their prep schools. Michigan has that designation where you can't do that. So for that standpoint, I know last year I got a call from my cousin who was like, hey, do you want to go? Dexter's playing, Ypsilanti in Dexter. I mean, Emoni Bates was in town here. He was in my – I didn't go. The long story there short, but it's pretty cool. He's right here. I know I went to a high school basketball game, saw CC play this year, and people were talking about the postseason last year and seeing Emoni Bates, and I mean everybody that's involved in high school basketball and college basketball knows who this guy is and has known about him for years.
Yeah, I remember my dad. I mean, my dad's obsessed with Emoni Bates. He's been sending me articles about Emoni every single time he sneezes, and he's been sending me articles ever since he was a freshman. But the one thing I think is really important, especially if we find out that the NBA pushes back the double draft to 2023 or something like that, and Bates ends up going to Michigan State, is that this is really important for Tom Izzo, because this is a 1-year window for him to win a championship. No excuse. If Emoni Bates steps on campus for the 2022-2023 season, there should not be any ifs, no ands, no buts about it. Unless Bates gets injured, he has to win a championship. Bates is so good that he would probably be the number 1 pick in the draft this year, certainly next year, and certainly the year after that in 2022. If Bates doesn't flip to go to the NBA or go to the G League or go overseas like LaMelo Ball did to get cash, it's an abject failure if in 2023 Izzo's not cutting down the nets. So what Izzo needs to do is do 2 things over the next 2 years. Number 1, he has to make sure that Bates does not decommit, either to go to another school or go to the NBA. And there hasn't been any evidence that Michigan State pays their athletes or their recruits, but there has been evidence that other schools will pay, or that agents will come in and pay, or that boosters or whoever will come in to pay for someone to go to Duke, someone to go to Carolina, someone to go to Kentucky. He's got to make sure that despite all those dollar signs that could be going his way, he stays. And number 2, he's got to make sure that it's not just Bates and nobody else. He's got to make sure that there's perhaps a rising superstar sophomore or some more one-and-done players that want to join him for the class of 2022-2023. You look at, for instance, Duke last year. They didn't just have the number 1 player in the country in R.J. Barrett. They had Zion Williamson, who was the number 2 player in the country, and then they had forget the third guy, but he was the 3rd best player in the country. Izzo's got to get himself Cam Reddish. He's got to get himself 2 other top 10 recruits in the country to want to play with Emoni Bates so they can guarantee a championship. Izzo's got to be thinking championship and undefeated season.
Yeah, well, I think Tom Izzo probably is thinking that. When you get, the next LeBron James, that's the pressure that comes along with it. I think he welcomes that. I think the thing about thinking about, Bates getting a bag from somebody else, I think by next year players are going to be able to benefit from their likeness. And you know what? The only single digit in Michigan State history that's retired is Scott Skiles. You tell me that Emoni Bates come in flashing that, I don't want him to wear a 1 or a 2. How about a 3? Emoni Bates coming in wearing that 3 for the Spartans. That thing will be flying off the shelf. Does he get paid for his likeness there? I mean, they can hand him a couple bags of cash. I got to imagine that Emoni Bates 1 year at Michigan State, people would, he's got to be worth $1 million. I mean, getting the $1 million, if he's the biggest player since LeBron James, I mean, I know you're talking about people funneling him money like, blue chips in the old days, but,
yeah.
This is the new way. You can pay him whatever you want. So if a car dealership, if Duke's coming up and he's already committed, say, look, we want to put Emoni Bates number 3 and his jersey up at our dealership. Here's $1 million.
Yeah, and another $5 million to voice some radio commercials and some TV commercials. Hey, I'm Duke small forward Emoni Bates, and I love driving this Chevy Malibu. This is a nice car that I got for them for free. If you want to drive like a blue chipper, you need to get this Chevy Malibu from Smith Chevrolet in Charlotte, or Smith Chevrolet in Chapel Hill, or whatever. I mean, or I guess not Chapel Hill, but the Raleigh-Durham area. Yeah, that's a fair point. So he could get that, and then that brings in the whole thing of, well, maybe he would go to USC or UCLA, because those are much bigger TV markets than Lansing, or even if you add in Detroit, and any TV market in the state of North Carolina.
Yeah, well, he's from Michigan, and he committed to Michigan State. So,
Yeah.
Until he bolts or somebody's handing him a bag to go somewhere else, I think he's going to end up in East Lansing unless the NBA allows you to jump.
And I have a strong feeling that he will be jumping. Let's now jump over to the second chapter.
Yeah, that gets us to baseball, and we're going to have a 60-game season. There's a 60-man expanded roster, and we know the names now, almost all of them, that are on there. And Spencer Torkelson, the Tigers came up big today, and speaking of handing him a bag, they handed him a big bag of cash, and so he's on that 60-man roster. So the question is, Chap, who should Ron Gardenhire, how should he slot his players in this abbreviated season that we're hoping that we have?
And that big bag you were talking about, $8.4 million for Spencer Torkelson, a monster bag of money.
Big bag.
Yeah, as far as what what Ron Gardenhire should do with this roster, look, 60 players going to summer camp, I don't think that's a big issue. And then seeing that Torkelson is one of those 60, I think that it's okay. I'm fine with it. You see that some other top prospects on the team are on that 60-man roster as well. And the reason I don't have a problem with that is because the Tigers are treating this like spring training, just like everybody else is treating it like spring training. And most teams have the vast majority of their 40-man roster in their final 60. You might have a couple of players, one or two players that would be starting in low A that would not make the final cut of 60 players. But generally, you're going to have your entire 40-man roster plus some premium prospects and some guys that are going to be in AA and AAA make that final 60. So Riley Greene would probably be gone, but he's on the 60-man roster. You would expect guys like Skubal, Manning, and Mize to make it. The number one overall pick, Spencer Torkelson, I would expect him to be in the final 60 for the spring training of 2021, so I'm okay with that. As far as making that 30-day opening day roster, that's a bit different because I don't expect Torkelson to be there. Riley Greene, matter of fact, I know Torkelson won't be there. I know Riley Greene won't be there. Guys like Daz Cameron and Derek Hill, who made the 60-man roster, and Alex Faedo, they're not going to make the team. I think that in terms of the exciting prospects who have a shot to make that 30-day opening day roster, you're talking about Paredes as a hitter, and then Manning, Mize, and Skubal. Anybody else that makes that opening day 30-man roster, it seems like either they would have to be completely lighting it up over the next month, or Al Avila would be making a huge mistake.
Yeah, I'm not so concerned about the opening day roster, or even when they pare it down to 28 or even 26 3 weeks in. I'm just looking, and I think you're right about a guy like Riley Greene. I don't expect to see Riley Greene. Al Avila said he doesn't see guys making the jump from A to the majors. And we know that they canceled minor league baseball, so they're not going to have this is an extended spring training for these guys that would be in AA. They'll probably go down the Fifth Third ballpark and have inter-squad games all the time. But the Tigers used over 50 guys last year. And considering with all the uncertainty of players getting sick, the IR, the old DL, that could I see a guy like Torkelson coming up, and especially when service time isn't in effect here? Yeah, and I'll tell you what, if I'm Al Avila,
you do.
If every game is worth 3 games or 4 games, and you're sitting here, and I don't know how many starts are you letting Jordan Zimmerman go out there and give up 6-7 runs? I mean, you answer that question. Turnbull too. I'd be going down, and I think Turnbull's set up to have a nice season this year. He's got pretty good stuff, but I'm telling you, man, if Zimmerman, I know they're not going to hear the boos. They're going to hear them right here on this show. Like, come on, man, these guys got to go and get going right out of the gate. Having Zimmerman around for 2 weeks and flubbing through starts, or having somebody else, mired in an 0 for 20 start, you know what? Get some of the younger guys up there now more than ever. I mean, to me, this is kind of like you got a chance that you've never had before in a 60-gamer, and also it's the expanded rosters in September. I mean, how's Ron Gardenhire going to juggle all this and slot these guys in? He better have a really short leash for these guys that we know are at the end of the line with the Tigers.
Yeah, look, I don't think anybody cares about what Jordan Zimmerman does this year. If he goes out and wins a Cy Young in 60 games, great, and then he can leave after that. But in terms of what we expect, yes, we would expect that if there were fans there, he'd be booed because he'd be giving up home runs. One thing you also have to remember about Jordan Zimmerman is not only is he a terrible pitcher, he's also not good at staying healthy. So that's another opportunity for a Manning, a Mize, or a Skubal to get themselves onto that roster and to get themselves some starts. But you mentioned a minute ago that you wouldn't be surprised and you would actually hope to see Spencer Torkelson make the 30-man roster and make his major league debut this year, right?
Yeah, well, at some point, I would like to see him make his major league debut. He doesn't have to make the opening day roster. That was my point.
Yeah, and I saw somebody on Twitter within the last week or so, some baseball experts say that he could hit cleanup for the Tigers right now. I don't buy that. Also, I showed this tweet a little bit earlier, a couple of minutes ago, from Jim Callis of MLB.com talking about Spencer Torkelson's slot value. He also, at the end of that tweet, says, perhaps the best all-around offensive talent to come out of the draft in 20 years. I don't know if I buy that. But here's one thing that you have to remember, because I know that there's going to be a lot of folks like you who are excited about Torkelson and want to see him right now just to see him get his feet wet and think, hey, if he's so great, if he's one of the top 20 prospects or top prospects in the last 20 years, he can hit major league pitching. Let me give you some evidence to suggest he's got no chance to be successful this year, because that's what I believe. Let's go back to the 2019 MLB draft, and I'll give you the top 5 positional players who were drafted and how they did last year. Spoiler alert, none of them made the majors. The number 9 pick last year was a catcher for the Braves, Shea Langoliers. He played 54 games last year at low A baseball and hit .255 with a .652 OPS, struck out 55 times in 216 games. The number 8 pick was a third baseman, Josh Jung, who went to the Rangers. He played 44 minor league games last year, 40 in low A ball. He hit .287, .752 OPS, and he had 1 home run and 157 at-bats. Let's move up to the number 4 pick in the draft, and outfielder J.J. Bleday of the Marlins. He played in 38 games, all at advanced single-A ball, where he hit a whopping .257 with a .690 OPS, struck out 29 times in 140 at-bats. The number 3 pick, first baseman Andrew Vaughn. He went to the White Sox. He played in 55 minor league games and hit .278. His highest level was advanced single-A ball, where in 29 games he hit .252, .760 OPS. And the number 1 pick in last year's draft was Adley Rutschman, a catcher for the Orioles. He played in 37 minor league games. His highest level of baseball was low A, where he was 6 for 39 with 2 home runs. Those were the top 5 positional player hitters in last year's draft. None of them got to Double A, and at best, you had guys struggling at advanced A ball. I know that Spencer Torkelson is better than some of these guys in terms of being a prospect, but he's not 3 levels better than them. There's no way he should be playing for the Tigers this year. He'd be overmatched.
Well, the Tigers might be overmatched themselves, and rather than playing inter-squad games down in Toledo against, his fellow minor leaguers, bringing him up for a couple series and see how he does. And you're right. I would say the odds of him coming up here and lighting it up would be, there's only a few and far between. But, I mean, that's when you pick a guy number 1, you do look not just from last year. You look over the last 20 years. You look for guys like, Bryce Harper, those type of guys that came up and made a splash. So it can happen. It probably won't, but I just need him to come up and hit more home runs than Travis Demeritte, so we win our bet. I win my bet over you.
Demeritte is going to hit like 1 or 2 home runs, and that'll be it. The second he hits his first, I win the bet.
All right, here's some feedback from Paul. It says, does Torque get the cash now or until he starts playing? What about the COVID question as well to that? He gets his cash. That's guaranteed money. He's good to go. Right?
Yeah, he's getting paid the $8.4 million. I think that's 100% certain. Yeah.
Keith on YouTube, looking at it right here. He says, it's still hard for me to imagine that there's going to be a season during the pandemic. I'm not really excited as the Tigers suck, but it would be great if Torque, Mize, Skubal, or Manning debuted, but they're about a year away. He says, I remember when they brought Gibby up, he wasn't ready, but had a few good games early as he struggled, and it was exciting just to see him up.
Well, look, if we didn't have the coronavirus pandemic, I think that by now, assuming there were no injuries, we might have already seen the debuts of Manning, Mize, and Skubal. That's how well they were pitching in the spring. That's how well they were pitching last year. And let's not kid ourselves. That Tiger starting pitching rotation is sorry. Well, what about Matt Boyd? A 4.5 ERA last year, was trash after the first 2 months of the year. I was trying to tell everybody nobody's going to want to trade for this guy who's had 2 months of good pitching and that's it. And I was right about that. Look, with weak competition, as long as these guys come into summer camp looking pretty good, there's a shot that we'll see. I'd be stunned if we didn't see at least one on the opening day roster, and I would expect to see all 3 before the end of the season if we actually play, which I don't think is going to happen due to the first part of that comment, the Rona crisis.
Yeah, well, that's the one part we can all agree on. It would be nice if we could just get baseball underway and be able to watch games here without that interfering and out there being, a bunch of different guys sick and, having to shut everything down and go back like we were yesterday or last week talking about it, where we would actually just have baseball there on the field. That would be that's what we're all hoping and, guessing if that's going to be the case coming up in 3-4 weeks. Yeah. I mean, I can understand the skepticism.
Yeah, and it's heavy skepticism. But outside of Torkelson and outside of those 3 pitchers, Manning, Mize, and Skubal, the other things that I'm watching for now that we have the 60-man roster as we get ready for summer camp, which I believe begins on Friday, are number one, who's going to get hurt in terms of the starting pitchers? Is it going to be Zimmerman? Is it going to be somebody else? Because that would obviously accelerate it for someone like a Manning, Mize, or Skubal. I also saw that Franklin Perez made the 60-man roster, and he's a forgotten individual because he was actually the number 1 chip that came over in the Justin Verlander trade. The problem is that he got injured right after that trade, and he's been injured the last couple of years. He's healthy right now. If he continues to be healthy, then his name should be right up there with Manning, Mize, and Skubal. As far as top prospects, if he can return to form. And then third of all, in terms of hitters on this roster, there's not much to be excited about. Crone and Scope showed some power last year, but I mean they're not guys for the long term. The only 2 guys I'm really intrigued about in terms of making the opening day roster are Victor Reyes and Jacoby Jones. Jacoby Jones, we know defensively is he can play at a Gold Glove level, and he was showing some signs last year of improvements at the plate. If he can hit 260, 270 with that speed that he has, then he could be a center fielder for the Tigers for many years to come. I'm not going to sit here and say an all-star, but certainly he can play all-star defense, and if he could show leadoff hitter capability in the batter's box, that would be nice. The other guy is Victor Reyes. Apparently the Tigers think that he's going to be in some sort of battle for starting left field with Christian Stewart. Victor Reyes is right now the best offensive hitter or best offensive outfielder on the Tigers. He really started to step up in the last 2 months of last year and even started to show some power. If he can show more power this year and creep closer to 300, he'd be a guy to be optimistic about in the future.
Yeah, I agree on Jacoby. Let's see him come back and be healthy here. I'd like to see Christian Stewart show some pop. I know he's got it in that bat and do so hot last year. Big year for him. See if he could have some power. And I would also hope that somebody like Isaac Paredes could jump in there and, flash something. We've been hearing about this guy down in the minors for a couple of years. And on the pitching side, you went through all those guys. I think Michael Fulmer's kind of the forgotten man here. He was he was tracking to be back right around now. It'd be nice to see him come back and look like his old self.
Yeah, I think that when we saw him at his best, he was a Cy Young candidate, and of course as a rookie, he almost won the ERA championship. All right, Dennis, without any further ado, we've got a big guest scheduled for the 3rd chapter, and let's turn that page right about now. And now for the 3rd chapter, as we turn the page, we welcome in a very special guest. He is one half of the duo The Odd Couple, airing weeknights from 7 to 10 p.m. on Fox Sports Radio. He's a Fox Sports 1 analyst on TV. He's a podcaster with Inside the Parker. He's a columnist on Deadspin, and he's got a new book out called, Rob Parker's Urinating Mouse?
It's called Tales of Rob Parker's Urinating Mouse, a collection of tweets.
That's right. We welcome in Rob Parker. Thank you for joining us, Rob.
Hey, Brian and Dennis, man, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get to your new book because I know you want to promote that and talk about everything that's going on in the sports world. And obviously, when we talk about the sports world, the first thing we have to get to is the coronavirus. Your urinating mouse has not been able to urinate on anything in months because we don't have any sports to talk about. But I look at these record cases around the country going up. I look at people not wearing face masks. I look at governors refusing to shut down their states months ago, refusing to shut them down now when we saw that months ago it worked in states like Michigan, New York, and New Jersey. I see these hospital beds starting to get packed in the ICU, and I think to myself, wow, we've got hotspots in 3 or 4 states now, 5 to 10 states maybe in a week, 20 states by the end of next month perhaps, when we're supposed to have baseball and basketball. And I think there's no way that we're going to have teams take the field and take the court. Is that how you see things right now, Rob?
I would like to believe that, but I don't believe it. I believe that they will force the issue. There's too much money on the table. That's why we're even where we are, Brian. Because, naturally you would just say, you know what, let's just call it a year and wait till 2021, let this thing hash out. But so much of the big money is in the playoffs. So they're trying to get to the playoffs because of the TV money. So I think that they will try it and see what they can do, and hopefully not too many players, if LeBron and Kawhi and some of those players get sick or get the virus or whatever, then you might have to rethink everything, because how legit will it all be? But I think they're going to give it a shot because of the revenue that they need for these sports. They don't want to shut down.
Yeah, and the fans don't want it shut down either, Rob. They want to see the guys go out there and play. And you mentioned the money. We know that for sure. I think the big thing that I keep thinking about, there's so many different factors that we don't talk about, like a ref or a coach or somebody in the kitchen, or when they go home and somebody gets sick in their family and suddenly we have a fatality or something. Those are the things that, those things could happen. That's there, but we don't talk about that much when we're talking about bubbles and let's get out there and, hey, it's just like catching a cold, some people saying, those things.
Yeah, the other thing too, and you're right, because those people won't be quarantined, and if they work at Disney World, I'm calling it the Mickey Mouse Championship because it's in Orlando. But those guys there, just think about it, like they're going back and forth and they can transmit it and whatnot. So you're right. I just don't know what the alternative is to try to stop it, other than not playing. You know what I mean? So that's the only real option. So I think they felt good when they test the players, and only a handful of players came back positive for the coronavirus. But once you start having contact and playing, the biggest thing I think is the colleges. How in the world could you not have the student body on campus but tell the football team to show up? If it's not safe enough for the student body to come back to campus, how could you ask football players to come back to campus? I think that's where you have an issue. And then they want the players to sign waivers. Colleges trying to put the onus on the kids. I think that's wrong.
Well, a lot of the colleges have already said, and that includes the president of the University of Michigan, that if they don't have students on campus, then we're not going to have football. So, and I think that kind of makes sense. But assuming we do have sports, in particular baseball and basketball, at the end of next month, we've got an 8-game regular season for basketball before the playoffs. We've got a 60-game regular season. Who are some of the teams that you're looking forward to seeing in terms of taking advantage of this scheduling quirk, in terms of basketball having a big 3 or 4 month gap, and in baseball having a very short run where it's a sprint to the playoffs as opposed to a marathon?
You know what? I picked the Clippers before the season. I like them even more. They're such a deep team, and depending on what happens, or if somebody gets sick or hurt, they have so much talent. They're 12 deep easily. And I like Doc Rivers and Kawhi, and Paul George were both banged up, right? They've had 3 months to heal up. They're younger. You know, LeBron was playing well with the Lakers, but he has to restart. This is year 17. He's susceptible, knock on wood, that he could be a guy who could wind up being hurt because he's trying to restart after, you know, such a long layoff. So I'm going to go with the Clippers there. And in baseball, I'm going to still pick the Dodgers and the Yankees for the World Series, even though it's only 60 games and people think some team could get hot and change the dynamics. And here's the reason why I'm picking these two teams. Both have unbelievable offenses. So early on, when the pitchers are struggling to get there, to get to, you know, get on track, they can score a lot of runs. They can cover up some of the mistakes by the pitching. And then when you look at after things kind of get to where you need it to get to, they have the pitching on the back end to make a run in the playoff. So I'm going to go with Yankees and Dodgers. I like both of those teams the best.
Yeah, hey, Rob, you mentioned, you know, they're playing for instead of the Larry O'Brien, they're playing for, you know, the Mickey Mouse trophy. It's more like that in baseball. Now, if it ends up being the Dodgers and Yankees, I think people are going to feel like it's more of a true championship, that you're going to have the teams that you thought were going to be there. But if it ends up being something like, you know, the Tigers or Padres, and I think you can say the same thing in basketball, if you get like the Sixers and somebody else slides in there, I don't know, the Mavs, it's going to really look Mickey Mouse for these leagues. I mean, they always want the big stars and the big teams, but I think coming out of this, to make it seem like it's been a real championship, I think both baseball and basketball want the power brokers in there.
I totally agree, because if the Padres win or some team like that, people will call it a fluke, that it was a fluke year and the Yankees got off to a bad start or the Dodgers didn't hit out the box, you know, or whatever it'll be. I think you're right. And some people think that some lesser teams, you know, Sparky Anderson used to say this, the late great Sparky Anderson, came down to just 42 games when you really think about it. And he was right. He said every team in the major league loses 60 games and every team in the major league wins 60 games. So there's your 120, right? Very seldom does a team not win at least 60. Even the bad Tigers, right, won 60 last year, right? What was it?
No, they won 47.
Was it 47?
47 and 114.
Wow, okay. So other than I forgot.
They were that bad.
47, oh my God. But most of the time it's 60 and 60.
Yeah.
And then you play for that middle 42. So you can still have a legit baseball. So it's funny because I'm going to write a column for Deadspin for Wednesday, and it talks about the idea that most of the time playoffs are you know, the difference between the good and bad teams is how well they do in those 42 games.
Well, and this year it could be every team wins 20, every team loses 20. What are you going to do in those other 20 games? I think that's going to be kind of fascinating. One topic that you love to talk about, whether it's on the radio, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's on, I would assume, Deadspin, is the Patriots and Tom Brady. You love to talk about how overrated they are. And the big news this offseason has been Tom Brady moving to Tampa Bay. And then, of course, just yesterday, Cam Newton replacing him in New England. Which of those two quarterbacks do you think is going to have a better season, assuming they play? And do you think the Patriots are now back as the favorites in the AFC East?
I think the Patriots are the favorites in the AFC least. They've owned that division, you know, until the other team finally step. I know Buffalo's better, and the Jets finished 7-2 last year, their last 9, so they came on. So I think that there's a chance there. You could win that division with 9 wins, maybe 9 or 10 wins. So it's not like you have to go 14-2 to win it. Cam Newton is healthy. The guy can play. A few years ago when he was still healthy, he had a great first half. The Panthers were 6-2. He was in the talk for the MVP race, and then he wound up getting hurt. And I think when people look at him, they think of the hurt Cam Newton, who could barely, you know, deliver the football. When you talk about the Patriots and Tom Brady, you know, I just think people get carried away. He's a 43-year-old quarterback. If you really watched them last year, they were the best 8-0 team that started the season, and they had nothing but cupcakes. And there were so many cupcakes on that schedule. I got a toothache because every week they were beating nobody. And then when they had to play some of the better teams, they struggled. It wasn't that as good. And go look at Tom Brady's numbers. You could go 12-4 and where they played and the playoffs and make up all that. Those were some of his worst numbers he's had in a long time in his career. So at 43, going to Tampa Bay, that a place where they haven't made the playoffs in 12 years. Next year will make it a baker's dozen, 13. I'm not convinced. I remember everybody jumped on the bandwagon for the Browns. You remember after they got OBJ in the trade?
Oh yeah.
Dennis, you at hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, I didn't think they were going to win the Super Bowl, but I thought they were going to get to the playoffs. Yeah.
But a lot of people did. You know what I mean? Some people thought, if you remember that their play in Vegas, their playoff, the Super Bowl odds went from 1,000,000 to 1 to 14 to 1.
Jeez.
And they didn't even make the playoffs. I mean, so I'm not buying the Patriots. I want to see a 43-year-old Tom Brady. I want to see if that noodle arm works. I want to see if they have protection for him. I'm just not there yet. I know Jameis Winston threw a lot of interceptions, but he also threw 30 touchdowns, had 5,000 yards, and they still struggled. It wasn't just, that was all on the interceptions. I know it's easy to paint that picture, but I'm not there with Tampa Bay.
Maybe he'll be the LOAT again down in Florida. Luckiest of all time. Hey, Rob, I wanted to ask you the news today. It was, 25 years ago that the Fan came on all sports radio in Detroit, WDFN, and you were part of that. What do you remember?
Yeah, that was great. It was July 11th, 1994, and I was actually, trivia question, the first on-air person they ever hired. Lorna Gladstone was the program director. Before the station got hired, it was April. I was in Fenway Park for Tigers opening day. And back then, there's no cell phones or anything. And they make an announcement in the press box. Telephone call for Rob Parker. He's calling me in the press box on opening day. I'm like, this is crazy. Pick up the phone. Hey, you don't know me. This is Lorna Gladstone. We're starting an all-sports station in Detroit. And I would love to interview you when you come back. I was in the interview for 5 minutes, and she hired me.
Wow.
And, yeah, it was crazy. Like, literally 5 minutes. She was like, I talked to a lot of people around town. They said you were really opinionated, and that's what we're looking for somebody to go out and say some stuff and hold people accountable, and that's all I've gotten about you, so I'm interested. And then she brought in a couple of people to be my co-host. And I didn't like the guys that she brought in. And I said, well, what about Stoney? Here's another nugget. Stoney was supposed to do the nighttime show originally with a guy named Ike Griffin, who played at Michigan State.
The Mega Man.
The Mega Man. And the name of the show was going to be Mike and Ike, like the candy. And I said to Lorna, well, what about Mike Stone? I think I could do a show with him. And then I came up with the name, The Odd Couple. Could this sports writer and this sports fan share a radio show without driving each other crazy? And that was it. And it was an awesome run. And WDFM will always be have a fondness in my heart.
Well, and since your time at WDFN, you've certainly expanded what you do, expanded your brand, going from there to National Sports Talk Radio, where you're right now doing an Odd Couple show with Chris Broussard on Fox Sports Radio. You're writing for Deadspin, and you've got the new book. You're an author, Tales of Rob Parker's Urinating Mouse. I saw on Twitter that you now have a name for your mouse. It's called Cotton. I know that it's in the book, but can you explain to people out there the concept for the book and how you came up with this urinating mouse?
It's crazy. And Brian Chapman, Dennis, is in the book. One of his tweets, he's actually in the book because we pulled the actual tweets from Twitter. And so I was married at one point, and we were at Thanksgiving dinner, and my then wife, grandmother was there, and there was a conversation going on, and my then wife Camille said, "Oh, Grandma, she can't hear," so kind of discounted her being a part of the conversation. And the grandmother turned to her and said, there's nothing wrong with my hearing. In fact, I could hear a rat piss on cotton. And I just lost it. And so I had never heard that. So I thought to myself, that is very funny. I held on, and that was years ago, like 20. I held on to that. So then something happened in sports where people were expecting some team to win or whatever, and they lose. And I go on Twitter, and I just kind of softened it. Instead of a rat, I was like a mouse. A mouse is smaller, so a mouse, urinating on cotton.
That's even softer,
Really,
quieter.
it's even softer, like lighter. Like, how could you hear that? A rat's big, So I just thought a mouse is. So some team lost, and I was like, it's so quiet in New England, you could hear a mouse urinate on cotton. And so then it became, like Tom Brady's Uggs and a half-eaten cheesesteak in Philadelphia, and like everywhere. And like, matter of fact, when the Yankees lost in the playoffs, I think it was so quiet in the Bronx, you could hear a mouse urinate on a dead rat. I mean, the depths of it. So I would always try to take it to whatever town or city, to try to. I think the mouse urinated on a pair of Jim Harbaugh's khakis, after a loss. So I'm always trying to. So what happened was it took off on Twitter, and every time it was a big loss or something, I would get people waiting for me, like, where's the mouse? What is he going to say? What is he going to urinate on today? And so I just put them all together. I think it's a fun little book. You know what I mean? And there's some you laugh at.
No, you're right about that. I always look forward to the urinating mouse as well. I purchased the book. It's a fun read. One thing you can do is you can look at the date of each tweet, so you can figure out what was Rob tweeting about, why was the mouse so eager to urinate, and we certainly hope that now that it's been 3.5 months without your mouse urinating, that it's still alive, it still has something left in the tank when we eventually get sports back. Rob?
I think he exploded from not urinating.
Oh, no. So we're going to have a Cotton too? Does Cotton have a brother or something?
I know, right?
Yeah. All right, Rob, we definitely thank you for joining us on the Fifth Chapter. You are our first guest ever on the Fifth Chapter, so add that to your resume, Rob.
Well, I appreciate it, and I just want to say to both of you guys, I admire and respect both of you, and you're both radio talents who deserve an opportunity bigger and better. So I hope that works out, man, because I enjoyed listening to you when I was in Detroit. You know that. I used to call under assumed name on Dennis's shows, Robin Southfield, on the radio, and spew until people would catch my voice. But good luck to you guys, man. Thank you.
All right, thanks once again, Rob. Appreciate it.
You're a Detroit legend, Rob.
There you have it, Rob Parker. Great interview that he had right there with us earlier today. Dennis, going into everything from Tom Brady to the coronavirus pandemic. And, of course, I've got the book right here, Tales of Rob Parker's Urinating Mouse. And there, as you can see, a little puddle right by number 12. Have to imagine that number 12 is Tom Brady.
Yeah, he might be taking aim at a Penn State player next year, so watch out. Yeah, how about that?
Hey, you know what? I would love for Rob Parker to want to tweet out about how quiet it is in State College, but Penn State runs the table, so his urinating mouse Cotton never gets the opportunity to urinate on a melted peachy paternal ice cream cone.
Gross.
Yeah, I agree.
Gross. Let's go to the fourth chapter.
Let's do it.
That is the Red Wings lottery blues. We go to Friday feeling like we've got a chance to be a millionaire. Not going to be a millionaire, maybe at least win $500,000, maybe 250. You're guaranteed like a consolation prize of like 50,000. That's what the Red Wings walked away with. Just a gut punch on Friday. Chap, how do you explain it?
So you explain it as if they won $50,000 in the lottery?
Yeah, and they're expected to win $1 million, and they were the favorites to do so.
Well, yeah, they were the favorites to win $1 million. And look, I think that $50,000 is fair. Saying that they won $50,000. Look, if you think you have a shot to win $1 million, it's disappointing. But if you or I go play the lotto and we find out that the winning numbers get us $50,000, we're probably going to be satisfied with it. We're probably going to be, matter of fact, more than satisfied. We're going to be ecstatic about it. It sucks that the Red Wings dropped from number 1 to number 4, but this is how the lottery worked. The Red Wings tanked like a no-limit soldier. Masterpiece Silk the Shocker Mia X. They tanked harder than they needed to because they finished with 39 points. Every other team in the league had at least 62 points. They had 17 wins. Every other team in the league had at least 25 wins. They had a minus 122 goal differential. Every other team had a minus 52 goal differential or better. They were atrocious. So based on all that, you think, man, we need the number 1 or number 2 pick, preferably number 1. But the way lotteries work is that they give you a better shot at the number 1 pick, but they also give you insurance to make sure that you won't drop any further than 4. It's not like the Red Wings dropped down to number 9 or 10 or 12. They dropped down to number 4. That was the worst pick they could get, and there was like a 50.6% chance that they would get the number 4 pick. It was disheartening, but it's not like this came out of the blue. I know that there are going to be folks out there saying that we got to just scrap the lottery and the worst team needs to get the number 1 pick, just like it is in football and baseball. I'm okay with the lottery in basketball. I'm okay with the lottery in hockey. They're going to get a very good pick. They're not getting the name that Red Wings fans have been obsessed with for the last 8 to 10 months, Alexis Lafreniere. But they got, everyone's been talking about the last time they had the number 4 pick, they got Steve Yzerman. Not saying that they're going to get somebody that good now, but the 4th pick is not the end of the world. They didn't hit the jackpot, but getting $50,000 is still pretty good.
Yeah, well, in the end, I'm with you. I don't think they need to change the draft lottery. It was the unusual year with the pandemic, which is kind of a slap in the face. The teams that actually have a chance to they're in the playoffs and could actually win the Stanley Cup, they could get the number 1 pick if they lose out in that first round. I mean, that's one of those things that you look at. And the Red Wings have lost 8 draft positions over the last 4 years, so it feels like they're jinxed too. But you could flip a coin 10 times, and on an 11th time, it's still a 50-50 shot. I mean, you're still playing with the odds here. I don't think Gary Bettman is cheating the Red Wings. I mean, it just sucks. And I think, like you mentioned, Yzerman being the 4th overall pick in 83. In 2017, the 4th pick was Makar from the Avalanche, and he's looked at as a top 5. Maybe they going into next year, the top defenseman in all the NHL. So you could find a very, very, very good player at number 4. It just sucks right now thinking about it.
Yeah, and it would be the same thing if in basketball, the Pistons, which have the number 5 pick, if you see the number 6 and 7 and 8 teams jump ahead of them into the top 3, it would be disheartening to see them drop from number 5 to number 8. But at the same time, if the Pistons jump up to number 1, or if the Red Wings weren't so bad and they had the 5th or 6th worst record and they jumped up to the number 1 pick or the number 2 pick, nobody would be complaining about how the lottery is rigged or how bad it is. Instead, you'd have folks in other parts of the country saying, oh, the Red Wings are the NHL's golden team. They're the NHL's baby. Of course they wanted to give one of the top 2 picks to the Red Wings when they only had the 6th or 7th best odds to get it. So I think that Red Wings fans should be careful not to be looked at as sore losers and looked at as whiny. The team was terrible, and that guaranteed them a top 4 pick. They got it. It just sucks that it wasn't the number 4 pick in the draft, or it wasn't one of the top 3 picks in the draft.
Yeah, most of that I agree with, except the whining part. I think you can cry and whine up until July 4th, and after that, whatever you said, I'm with you on that.
Well, I'm talking
July 4th and then move on.
Well, I'm talking about don't whine about the process because
whine about everything until July 4th, and then move on.
Okay. Well, one thing that you have to look forward to now, if you're a Red Wings fan, is life after not getting the number 1, 2, or 3 pick, and what could they be looking at with the number 4 pick? And I put up a mock draft on the screen from NBCSports.com, And no surprise, the number 1 pick, Alexis Lafreniere, goes to the mystery placeholder team, which is also kind of a weird thing, a mystery team. And you mentioned that. The number 2 pick they have going to the Kings, Quinton Byfield. Number 3 pick is Tim Stuzzle of the going to the Senators. And then number 4, they have the Red Wings taking Jamie Drysdale. It says largely believed to be the best defenseman in the 2020 NHL draft. Drysdale should draw plenty of attention. Experts praise his skating, not just speed, but strong edge work as one of his best qualities. And they also mentioned, of course, last year the Red Wings picked up Moritz Seider during the NHL draft in the 2019 season. Do you have a preference as to who you'd like the Red Wings to take? You're looking at Drysdale. You're looking at the goalie. Do you think they should try to trade up or down?
Yeah, well, I think that me and Drysdale have something in common. We're both good on the edge. He's good on the edge defensively. I'm good out in the yard with the edger. But I think that the Red Wings need a defenseman, so they need help with the blue line. They can't go wrong there. But I do think that Yzerman is really thinking about moving back and drafting the Russian goalie. So if I had to predict today, I think that he will move down and trade that number 4 pick.
And the goalie you're talking about is Yaroslav Askarev, and they mentioned him in that same article in terms of honorable mention because they did a mock draft of the top 8, and then an honorable mention, Yaroslav Askarov. And it says goalies don't go in the first round very often. Despite that trend, Askarov has a chance to crack the top 10. Hey, if a goalie looks good, if a goalie looks about as can't miss as goalies prospects look, then it could be worth the risk, right? And I'm with you about trying to go get Askarov. If they can't trade down, I'd be okay with them selecting him right there at number 4. The bottom line is that the Red Wings were historically atrocious. I mentioned all those numbers about how, in terms of wins and points, goal differential 70 points worse than everybody else. That means that they were atrocious across the board. You want to talk about forwards? They need it. Defensemen? They need it. Goaltender? They need it. Like when we were talking about the Lions draft, could they draft Okuda, Simmons, or Brown? Yes to all of them because their defense sucked everywhere, and the team was awful at every phase of the team. In every phase, you look at the Pistons; they need help at point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, and with Drummond gone, they need help at center. So who should they take? I prefer LaMelo Ball, but anybody will help them. Similar with the Red Wings, they need help everywhere. Jimmy Howard is gone, so they're going to need a goalie for the future. Not that this Askarov will join them on opening night, but they need help everywhere. I'm not going to be disappointed with whoever they take unless the experts say that Yzerman reached and he reached 15 or 16 slots to get this guy. But I prefer the goalie. If not, whoever they take, I'm going to be fine with because they need help everywhere.
Yeah, I remember the last team to take a goaltender in the first round was the Tampa Bay Lightning, and it was Steve Yzerman as the GM when they took Vasilevsky. So
how'd that work out?
It was great.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. They could win the cup if there's a season coming up in a month from right now.
Yeah, so
backstopped by him.
I know there's a lot of apprehension about taking a goaltender, and if that's real, then take anybody else. They could use help everywhere, but they need a goaltender. I mean, badly in their system. They've got some forwards and defensemen in their system, but goaltenders, they're in a major hole when it comes to that.
All right, let's get to the 5th chapter. That takes us to trivia time. You ready to go?
I am ready to go. I've won, each of the first 2 times, so I'm looking to go 3 for 3.
All right, well, one of those times it was a game called They Did It Against. They gave you a Detroit sports team. I gave you a scenario, and you had to tell me who they did it against. I'm doing it this time with the Detroit Lions. I give you the scenario. You tell me what team they did it against. You get it?
I get it.
All right, Barry Sanders in 1997 ran for 184 yards and became the 3rd back in 3 decades to go over 2,000 yards for a season. He ended the year with 2,053 yards. Barry needed a big day in his final game of the season, the final regular season game against this team.
I can see him breaking away from the pack when he was at 2,001 yards and getting that 50-yard game to secure the 2,000-yard season. The team, I don't know. I mean, there's a 6 in 16 chance that it was a divisional rival. So Packers, Bears, Vikings are the best odds. I'll go Packers. Green Bay Packers.
Incorrect. It was the New York Jets. In the 94 season, 0-1.
Yeah.
A year after their 28-24 home playoff loss, talking about the Lions, they lost the next year 16-12 in the playoffs as Barry Sanders, very infamous game, 13 carries, -1 yards. -1 yard, I guess it is. So, who was that against?
Was that against the Packers?
Correct.
Yes, there we go.
1 for 1.
All right.
I thought you would have got the first, not the second. All right, these are more modern, 21st century.
Okay.
This is a game with fans heading to the exits, streaming to the exits at Ford Field.
Any
Matt
game.
Stafford, yeah, that doesn't give you a lot there.
Any game at Ford Field.
But Matt Stafford punched in the final TD in a game that is most remembered for Calvin Johnson going for 329 yards, just ending up second to Flipper Anderson's 336. Who was Megatron's mega game against, his 329-yard game?
I want to say the Bengals, because I remember him having a great game against the Bengals. This is 2012, you said, right?
I didn't give you a year.
Oh, you didn't give me a year. Gosh, I know he had a really good game.
That sounds about right, though.
Yeah, I know he had a really good game against the Bengals. I'm going to guess the Cincinnati Bengals. Final answer.
It was, see if anybody online knows it, the Dallas Cowboys.
Dang it.
1 for 2.
So I've got to get the next two right, or else I'm going to be a loser. You've been a loser multiple times, but I have not been a loser at all. I've got to keep my record perfect.
Keith knew it was the Cowboys. Speaking of losers, the Lions in 2008 lost every game. It was the 0-16 season. No play summed it up more than Dan Orlovsky running out of the back of the end zone, but not realizing it. What team did he do this against?
That was one of the biggest same old Lions plays in team history. It might be the same old Lions play in franchise history, especially given the season that it occurred in. This is easy. The Minnesota Vikings were the opponent. Final answer.
All right. Correct. 2 for 2, so it's all coming down to this one.
I'm ready.
Speaking of memorable gaps like Orlovsky, in the last game Matt Stafford played for the Lions bungled a 4th and 1 from the opponent's 1. Stafford had the play call sent in by Darrell Bevel and approved by head coach Matt Patricia. The Lions called for play action and then targeted a third-string tight end, and it didn't work. The Lions lost against this team.
Would that be the Oakland Raiders? And I know that that's the Oakland Raiders because I know that so many times, whether it's on this show or when you were on the radio, you referenced how much you hated that play. That's one of the cornerstones of why you're not sold on the Darrell Bevel offense, taking out all those key players at the end of the Raiders game last year. I'm going to go the Raiders.
Well, you're right. And it wasn't just like taking out key players. It was taking out Kenny Galladay and Marv Jones.
Yeah.
That tandem had played one of the best NFL games as a combo that I had ever seen. And then I had to listen to Matt Patricia the next week say, we do things based on game flow and what we're seeing from our players. And I was thinking, really, what about that 4th and 1 call from the 1? Where you yank 2 guys out when they're having the greatest games of all time.
Remember, he's a rocket scientist. He's got a pencil in his ear. He's smarter than all of us. He knows exactly what he's doing. If he had put in those receivers, the results would have been even worse, right?
Yeah, well, just go back, when you got Marshawn Lynch from the 1-inch line, throw a pass, cost yourself a Super Bowl, throw a bomb against the Cardinals in week 1. Everybody loves Darrell Bevell, man. He is a reckless play caller. Remember that. Mm-hmm. But he is, as the coordinators go, the better one. I'll give you that.
Well, it doesn't take much. Paul Pasqualoni was atrocious last year, and then he before he could get fired, he quit. Retired.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, retired. Here you go. All right, chap. Well, speaking of the NFL, Cam Newton has found a new team. It's the New England Patriots. We will weigh in on that on Thursday's show. That's what we'll hit in one of the chapters, the 5th chapter, on Thursday.
Represents the myth by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talking sports, the people can't wait. He represents the myth, being true. EMU cut Dennis in the fall, and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around his face when that light turns red. So don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap off and sit back for the chapter. Brian Chapman, Dennis Fith, when they open their mouths, they spit in the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast, or download it to your phone to keep the podcast.
Hold on, let me